Drywall Repairman here. Today we're doing a medicine cabinet patch-in. This is a common job that people do. It's an easy thing to update your bathroom. As for me, I like the medicine cabinet. I like the extra storage to put away all my little things in my bathroom away, hidden out of sight. A lot of people like to just delete these. So it's an easy process. Of course, just like any drywall project, there is mess involved, so you want to mask the floors, mask anything you don't want to get mud, debris on. There's always going to be some cleanup, but it's easier to catch most of the debris or demo on some plastic or a tarp. Most of these medicine cabinets, standard height is about 24 inch. You'll notice I'll cut to the right. I'm going to cut right halfway on the center of the stud, that way I can put the screws in. I've seen guys cut higher than 24 inches, so they cut the tops and bottoms also. But what this does, now you're going into a whole sheet of sheetrock. I've seen stores, they sell like a 24 inch by 24 inch piece of drywall, 2 foot by 2 foot pieces of drywall. So if you get one of these or two of these, you can make it fit. If you cut into the top, you're going past 24 inch. So now you're going to get into a whole sheet of drywall. So with me, I never cut the tops unless I really have to, because I like to keep my patches under 24 inches. It just makes it easier for sheetrock handling. As you know, most sheets are sold 4 foot by 8 foot sections, but they do sell pieces at 2 foot by 2 foot pieces, like patch pieces. All you need is something to screw to on the sides. Ideally, you'd like to get screws in top, bottom, in each side. Some guys also like to block these in instead of cutting the sheetrock back center to the stud. You can also add 2x4 blocking, but with that you have to add blocking. You're going to have to use an impact drill to get the framing screws in. It's an easy way to do it. Some guys do it. I do it sometimes if I have to. But this one was easy, so all I had to do was just cut back center of the stud. And I think with this, it's going to be right at 24 inches by like 19 inches. So I'm able to do it with one piece of sheetrock. Easy patch in. Add plenty of screws. Since this is 1/2 inch sheetrock and wood framing, I'm using 1.25 inch coarse drywall screws. You can also use like 1.5 inch. If really need be, you can use 1 5/8 inches, but 1.25 inch is all you need for 1/2 inch sheetrock. It's the go-to screw for most interior sheetrocks with 1/2 inch sheetrock. If you're using 5/8 sheetrock, then you'll need to do an 1 5/8 inch or a 2 inch screw. I like to add screws on the outside edge also to tighten up the old sheetrock on the stud whenever possible. Sometimes by cutting out stuff, you loosen it up. So we don't want this to crack. So add plenty of screws every 2 to 4 inches. Easy layout. Just lay them out. Try to keep it symmetrical, clean. You hang sheetrock, if there's any gaps, no big deal. You can always pre-fill gaps. Unless you're doing something brand new, there's always going to be gap. You're patching in stuff. Best guys, don't make it even that tight. You can make it tight. If it was a big gap, like I can stick my pinky in or my finger in, then maybe you can just cut a little piece of strip of sheetrock and stuff it in there. If it's really bad, like I said, you just pre-fill it before you do any mudding. These gaps here are not terrible, so I'm just going to use a fiberglass mesh tape. I'm going to fill it in with the fiberglass mesh tape. Before you tape anything, always scrape your areas where the tape's going to set. That way you get any goobers, any high spots off. Right here I'm just kind of channeling the side of the sheetrock because it's kind of hump here, so I don't want a big mud groove here. So sometimes you can just kind of 45-degree channel your corners if you need be. It's not needed, but I just try to channel these a little better to clean it up. Go through with a 6-inch knife, scrape all the goobers off it. Some guys right now, after they scrape this, they might go do a pre-fill. You can just go through and pre-fill it, but I'm just going to fiberglass it. Always use a fiberglass mesh. I know guys like to use fiberfuse and whatever. You could use whatever you want, man. You don't need to argue with me. It's not a discussion. This is what I use because I have to warranty my work. I'm not out trying to buy some new gimmick tape of the year that just came out because someone on YouTube is pushing the product on me. There's reasons for fiber fuse. Fiber fuse I use on areas that crack out again, like stubborn cracks that keep re-cracking. That's when I use fiber fuse tapes. But any repair work, I'm just going to go, my go-to is just a regular fiberglass mesh tape. It sticks, it holds, it don't crack, and if you use it correctly, you'll never have any issues. Notice I didn't pre-fill this first before I fiberglass. That's why I'm going to go through with some mud, and I'm going to strike in the area with a 5-minute quick set mud. Striking it in, I'm basically pushing it in. I'm getting it into all the grooves of the mesh, fiberglass mesh tape. It's getting inside the gap. Then I'm going to turn around and do a nice first coat over the area. I'm using a quick set 5-minute mud. Of course, if you're not good at mudding and you never mudded before, you just stick to an all-purpose joint compound. All-purpose joint compounds have to dry overnight, but if you make a mistake, the next day you can sand away your mistakes. These quick set muds that I use, a 5-minute, 20-minute, 40-minute, I have to use these products because I have to finish the job from start to finish in one trip. I can't come back every day, every other day to do my next step. So that's why I use a fiberglass and I use hot muds. So they set up, I'm able to get it all coated out 2 times, 3 times, whatever need be, and then texture it all in one trip. Get it all coated out. You're going to have to let your coat set up, and then you'll be ready for your second coat process. With these quick set muds, they set up in a due time. Like this is a 5-minute mud, so it starts to set up between 4 to 6 minutes. If you're using a quick set muds, which I said is a more professional grade material, you're going to have to catch it before it sets up so you can manipulate it. We call this the slick out process. I know on the bags it says easy sandable product, but we do not sand hot muds. If someone sands hot muds, obviously they don't know what they're doing. More power to them. They can sand cement if they feel like it, if that's their thing to do in life. But with hot muds, you want to catch them as they're starting to set up using a wet sponge and a clean, straight 6-inch knife. You're basically slicking out the area. You're going over it, getting rid of the edges, and you're going over it with a 6, taking off the extra mud, pushing down, basically manipulating the material. Since I slicked it out really well, I'm just going to do a tight second coat over all this. Some guys like to go the opposite direction of their first coat. You can do that too. That just fills in any grooves, waves, stuff like that. So that's why they always do cross skim the opposite direction the next coat. Just get it all coated. As you see, I'm using a 12-inch knife. If you're not really good at mudding, maybe you should just stick to a 10-inch knife. I like to always use a 12-inch knife. It's like the go-to coating knife for me. I don't carry a lot of knives, so I just have a 6-inch knife, a 12-inch knife, I think a 14-inch knife, and a few 18-inch knives, but that's what I use for everything. Your go-to for patchwork's maybe a 6-inch knife and a 10-inch knife, and you can pretty much do most common household drywall patching repairs you need to do. We're going to let this second coat set up, and then we're going to do the same thing like the first coat, kind of slick it out, get rid of the edges, and then it'll pretty much be ready for texture. Your texture here may not be the same as this. This is like a heavy skip trowel type texture, but the coating process is the same. So if you have like a smooth texture or you're just trying to get it ready for texture, maybe your third step here would just do a tight skim coat with joint compound and leave it smooth. But since there's a rough texture here, I got to match what's around. So it's a heavy skip trowel that we're going to be doing here. This is my mud's fully setting up. I'm just cocking in the angle. You really don't have to do this step. I'm just making a nice, clean, perfect angle for my client. Some guys like to also cock in maybe before they primer and paint. But I have some time here and I have some caulking on hand, so I'm just doing a tight beat of caulking in the angle to make it nice. With this, I'm doing a skip trowel. Most textures, if not all, are done with an all-purpose joint compound. There's different types of joint compounds out there, but the go-to is an all-purpose joint compound. With textures, the consistency is a very well mixed, heavy pancake consistency mud. Has to be really mixed well. No clumps, lumps, nothing. You don't want those clumps and goobers in your mud. So if you have dirty, clumpy mud, you might even have to strain it through a metal strainer, whatever it takes. With this, it's ready to go. So I just mix it up. And then I can put it on. I'm just using a 6-inch knife. A lot of guys like to use a big 14-inch knife, 16-inch knives, 18, 20-inch knives. Sure, I have all those knives. But I'm using a 6-inch knife because there's easier control to match patchwork when you have a small, straight 6-inch knife. If you're doing new sheetrock, new boards, and you're doing whole open areas, open walls, of course you use a bigger knife because you're making ground. You can use a big knife on this too, but a 6-inch knife, you have better control and you can make a perfect texture match with a little bit of practice. This is a heavy skip trowel here. It's almost like a double skip. So it's put on pretty heavy. Of course, in your area, you're not going to have this type of texture. Every house out here, every different neighborhood I go to, there's always a different texture. This is just one of the skip trowel variations. There's light skip trowels, heavy skip trowels, directional skip trowels, multi-directional skip trowels. So we have to go in and kind of match any texture in there. If the texture is really bad on your walls and terrible, sometimes you have to have no choice but to skim over the walls, smooth again, and start over. But the process is the same. If you don't have a skip trowel like this, all you would do is just go through and do a tight skim coat and leave it smooth of a joint compound. Once it's all textured up like this, you're going to let that all-purpose joint compound texture dry overnight, 24 hours. And the next step is to lightly sand it. Sanding like a fine or medium sanding block or 150 to 220 grit sandpaper. I always like to sand these textures. It helps blend them in, especially a patch on the wall. It's a nice transition. And once you sand it, some guys like to take a damp sponge or rag and de-dust the walls. And then you're going to have to primer. Always primer drywall. Even a small nail hole, you need to use primer. PVA drywall sealer or Kills 2 latex are the go-to products for a primer seal before paint. I know they have paint and primers in one out there, but just use a primer on new drywall. That way you don't have any problems, no issues.